Hey, welcome aboard. You're listening to Light 'em Up, and Light 'em Up focuses on leadership, the criminal justice system, and crime scene investigation. We enlighten, educate, and empower others with the truth. Like it or not, the truth disturbs, the truth divides, but ultimately, the truth delivers. I am your host, Phil Rizzo. I'm the principal owner of Rizzo's Protective Group. We are a high-risk security consulting firm headquartered out of Akron, Ohio, and today we are extremely honored and we're very excited about sitting down and talking with retired Cleveland Police Homicide Detective Tom Armelli. Tom is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and he's hammered out a stellar and highly decorated career in law enforcement. Tom joining the Cleveland Police Department in 1981 and retiring recently in 2016. And you may remember him from his episodes on the First 48 on the A&E television network. I love that show, and I can binge watch that show for hours and hours without moving a muscle. Detective Armelli has investigated over 200 homicides and is the author of 5 books relating to the history of the Cleveland Police Department and his work as a homicide detective. Detective Armelli, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you. I hope you're doing well today.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Great to have you. I'm excited. Like I told you earlier, I'm a New York Yankees fan, and I feel like I'm talking to Mickey Mantle here.
Well, don't get your hopes up. I'm not just a guy here.
Well, Tom, let's jump right into it. We got a lot of ground to cover. I wanted to ask you 1,001 questions, and the first question I have for you is, you get the phone call in the middle of the night, you wake up from a deep and much-needed sleep, and you're up. You're next on the board. You're catching the next case. What are your processes to begin to investigate the next homicide that you catch?
Well, first of all, when you're on call through the night shift, there's not too much deep sleeping going on. You're kind of sleeping with one eye open and an ear for the phone. But that being said, when we get the call from radio that a homicide's occurred, we get the location, and you jump out of bed, you get dressed, you wash your face, and get to the scene as quickly as possible. And then the first thing you do when you get to the scene naturally is talk to the zone car people that are there. They were there first on the scene. They have possibly identified evidence, identified some witnesses, and they'll have the first-hand information and then set us in the best direction with the information that they've gathered in the time between the homicide occurred and when the homicide detectives arrived.
I see. So the first officer on the scene, he or she is very important because, in essence, they have to protect and preserve evidence for the detectives to show up and for the crime scene investigation unit to show up as well. Would that be true? Would that be a fair statement? The first guy or officer, female officer on the scene, they're crucial to protecting evidence before it can be further processed.
Absolutely, Phil. It's a very important step in the process. The first officer's there. They're charged with protecting the scene, making sure no evidence leaves, making sure any witnesses that are there are identified and held for us, or at least identified so we can follow up with them later. So there is a skill and a technique to being the first officer on the scene and maintaining the scene for the homicide detectives and for the CSI people.
I see. You had mentioned a specific skill. An investigator investigates. That's his or her job. And investigation is an art. Would you agree with that? Is that true or false? Investigation is an art.
I wouldn't necessarily label it an art. I think it's a skill. I think it's something that you can develop. I think certain people do better at it, at acquiring that skill and putting that skill to use. But I think skill would be a better use of a better descriptive word than art.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. The evidence must drive the investigation. You show up on the scene, and the investigator has to start doing his or her job. They have to start investigating. And it shouldn't be the investigator driving the evidence. You have to be mindful, and you have to be cognizant to not let any biases interfere with, for example, the thorough and efficient and relevant search for justice and truth, because that's what it's really all about. I made up, in anticipation of our interview, Tom, I made up an acronym that I thought might properly address what a good investigation should look like. This acronym, it goes through the letters of the word tarot, like a tarot card. So, for example, the letter T means you have to be thorough and you have to follow up on all leads to their logical conclusion. The letter A in the word tarot means you have to be accurate. For example, the credibility of a source has to be accurate and it has to be supported by the evidence. The R represents relevance. You have to consider a wide spectrum and a depth of details without being bogged down or confusing the facts of the case or obscuring the truth. Of course, you have to remain objective in the process, carefully avoiding the interjection of any prejudice or anything like that. And last but not least, you have to investigate all facts in a timely manner. With that little acronym in mind, what, if anything, would you add to the list of essential characteristics of a good investigation?
Well, yeah, I mean, all those things are true and accurate, and that's probably a pretty complete list. And that's where, if you follow your guideline there, or your acronym, that's where your skill comes into play. After you've done this for a few times and you've learned from experienced detectives on where to find evidence, how to develop leads, how to follow through, how to persevere, all those things come into play, and that should lead you in the right direction. Working with a partner in Cleveland, we had partners with us all the time, and working with a partner, we kind of helped each other stay on the correct path and not veer one way or the other emotionally or otherwise.
I see. That's good. Yeah, to keep you balanced, to check on you, to make sure the investigation's moving forward in a proper direction. That's good. Teamwork.
2 heads are always better than one.
Yeah, 2 heads, exactly. You can go farther with that all the time. Talk to our listeners about your professional opinion of what's essential in the process of checking an alibi.
Well, it's a relatively simple concept. If someone's telling you, they were doing something or they were at a certain place at a certain time, you have to go to those places and talk to those people and confirm what they're saying. And you have to be kind of direct, and you have to be inquisitive. Some people will give you a general idea of where they were or what they might have been doing. You got to kind of get specific with them, and then look specifically for verification of the alibi.
I see. Tom, doing this for as long as you've done it, you pretty much have developed a sixth sense, I would think. You can pretty much get a gut feeling as to whether somebody's lying to you through their teeth or if what they have to say has some credibility to it. Don't you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? You get a sixth sense of truth or not?
Well, that's true. And I think that's true not just of homicide detectives, but I think every policeman that's been on the job for any length of time develops that ability to, maybe even a little bit better than the regular citizen, on how to tell if somebody's lying to you or being truthful or partially truthful or deceptive. So that's something that comes with time and experience.
I see. Yeah, I would think so. That wouldn't be so easy for a newly assigned homicide detective, I would imagine. I would imagine that would have to come, like you said, through time and the development of experience, having your boots on the ground for long enough time to detect that.
Well, usually, by the time you get to the homicide unit, you've been on the job for 10, 15 years. So in those 10 or 15 years, whether you're working basic patrol or one of the detective bureaus out in the districts, you have a lot of experience talking to people and doing investigations, whether it be someone stole a bike out of a garage or someone assaulted somebody. You're always talking to people and evaluating their statements to you.
Yeah. Detective Armelli, tell us why the first 48 hours are considered to be the golden hours of a homicide investigation.
Well, it just kind of stands to reason that with any crime, the fresher the information that you have, the more accurate it's going to be. People's memories are a lot sharper, and you're getting the information from people fresh from their experience. And also, people are more emotional at that point in time, and people that maybe normally wouldn't say anything to you, information they wouldn't give you, when emotions are running high, they're more likely to expound upon what they know and share that information with the detectives.
I see. How important is that logbook to a detective? I mean, our memories, sometimes I can't remember, Tom, what I had for dinner the night before. Jotting down facts, jotting down details in that logbook, how important is that to not only to an officer, but also to a detective?
Well, I mean, that's just crucial. I mean, that's like standard. I remember my first, before I reported to the homicide unit for my first day at work, I called the boss down there and I asked him, what do I need to bring with me? And he said, just a pencil and a notebook. And, it's been that way for, since detectives were detecting. Back in the 1800s or whenever police work started, those are the tools of the trade, a pencil and a piece of paper.
Absolutely. Pretty basic. In that question that I asked, to piggyback on that about the first 48 hours being considered the golden hours, why is it if you don't find a lead within the first 48 hours, why are your chances of solving a case cut in half? I mean, what goes into that formula to where if you don't nail it in the first 48 hours, your chances of solving the case are cut in half?
I guess I don't know if that's a true statement. I don't know where that figure comes from, because, nowadays, a lot of homicide scenes are nothing more than a dead body laying in a field.
Yeah.
And you have absolutely nowhere to go, and you're dependent upon scientific evidence to lead you in some direction. And that scientific evidence, once collected, takes time to analyze, and it might be several weeks before you get the results from DNA or from analyzation of some evidence that's there. Fingerprint evidence is a little bit quicker, but still, it doesn't come immediately. And when it does come, it may be several days or a week or two or even longer that you get a lead that you can work on.
Yeah. Why does it take so long for toxicology to come back? I mean, wouldn't it be beneficial to the whole process if you can find out within 24, 48 hours as to whether the person, what was in their system? Why does it seem like it takes so long for toxicology to come back with a report?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. If we could get that information instantaneously, we'd be super. But the fact of the matter is, it comes down to money. There's only so much money to hire lab personnel. There's only so much money to buy equipment. And in Cuyahoga County, the crime lab services, 75 or 80 police departments.
I see.
And they're all throwing evidence at these guys, left and right every day. So it's just one of those things that just takes time. It's just the nature of the beast.
Just boils down to money. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. If you're joining us just now, we're talking with retired Cleveland Police Homicide Detective Tom Armelli. And Tom is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and he's hammered out a stellar and highly decorated career in law enforcement. He joined the Cleveland Police Department in 1981 and recently retired in 2016. Tom, did you retire after the Republican National Convention or before?
That was my last hurrah. We anticipated it was going to be a real mess, and I had thought that I was going to retire before the convention hit town. I just didn't want to be involved in all the insanity that was anticipated.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, one of my friends was running one of the operations down there, and they asked me to be involved in a plainclothes capacity and just kind of being shouldered to some of the out-of-town policemen that were coming into town to learn what we were doing in anticipation that they would be holding similar events in the future. So I got a chance to meet some detectives and supervisors from Canada and from Texas and from California and from Florida, from all over the United States that were here just to see how we were handling the convention. And it turned out to be one of the best experiences of my career. It was a lot of fun. We had a couple thousand policemen from all over the United States, and I mean, the convention was just a super success, and I was glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, that was an exciting time. I've never in my life seen more police congregated in one area. I mean, on the corner of Euclid, I saw New Jersey State Highway Patrol. I mean, it was an incredible sight. It really was. It
was great for the citizens, the people that worked downtown, and the people that were in town to see this convention and participate, and just the Clevelanders that came down to see what was going on, to meet and see 10 or 20 policemen standing on every street corner. And these policemen were from every corner of the United States, and everybody, they was friendly, and it was fun, and there was interaction between the Clevelanders and these policemen, and it was just a great time to be a policeman, and I think it was a great experience for the public to get some face time with these policemen from all over the country.
Yeah, I agree. I'd agree 100%. Tom, can you share with our listeners what the thin blue line is, and what does that mean? When someone hears that, they talk about the thin blue line.
Well, the thin blue line represents the law enforcement community in the United States, and the line separates peaceful citizens, normal citizens, everyday citizens, and the anarchy of crime and criminality. That's where the law enforcement community, that's where we put ourselves, right between the bad guys and the good guys.
I see. A very delicate balance, a very fine line, I would imagine. Let's talk a little bit more. Let's drill down a little bit more. In your professional opinion, do you think the police are capable of policing themselves with a lot of things that we've seen currently in the news, on the television? Let's talk a little bit about the ability of the police to police themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we have the ability, and I think that actually we're probably the only ones that can do that, police or investigate ourselves. I mean, you have doctors, probably kill way more people than the police do over the course of a year. They monitor themselves, they govern themselves, they investigate, their mistakes, and there's no reason why police officers can't do the same.
Yeah.
And we do the same. I mean, no police officer worth their salt wants to see any policeman, any other person out there wearing a uniform, calling themselves a policeman, that are committing crimes or acting improperly or bringing discredit to the badge. Yeah. I mean, nothing hurts me more, and I'm sure 99% of the police officers in America feel exactly the same way I do. When you see on the news some policeman somewhere commits a heinous act, and it reflects very poorly on the rest of us, and it hurts. It actually hurts now because we pay the price for someone across the country, their actions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always said that the actions of a few officers can really tarnish the positive effect of the rest of the bunch. Those kind of actions that are taken individually by police officers, they give a bad name or a black eye to the officers that are really there to protect and serve daily and do so. And so, yeah, I would agree exactly with what you said. Let's talk a little bit more about mistakes and being held accountable. Let's talk about IAB, Internal Affairs Bureau. Some of my students who I teach criminal justice and forensic science to, they're thrilled with the concept of IAB. I don't know why, but they wanted to know, and this is a question directly from one of our students. Does IAB, the Internal Affairs Bureau, also known as the Rat Squad, so I don't know what they've been watching or what they've been listening to, but in all honesty, does IAB work for the police, the citizenry, or for whom?
I would say they work for the police profession. Mm-hmm. They because they're the ones who investigate police misconduct. And like I said before, no policeman that I know, and 99% of the policemen in America they don't condone police misconduct.
Right.
And we realize that it has to be dealt with. These are the guys that deal with it. They get a bad rap because there's really not a lot of police misconduct that rises to the level of a felony or major crime or misconduct. And so most internal affairs units are filling their time with guys that don't have their shoes shined, guys that don't have their hair cut, someone that, little things like that just get under a police officer's skin.
Yeah.
That's where they get their bad rap. But they are a necessary part of the police department to protect our reputation.
No, I see. Absolutely. I mean, it all goes together. I mean, and I can see where IAB serves an important role in the overall process. Now, Tom, you being a historian regarding police, let's talk a little bit about the Peelian Code and Sir Robert Peel, who in 1829 he established the London Metropolitan Police Force, and for all intents and purposes, he's considered to be the father of modern day policing. In his Peelian Code, which maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with, but the second canon or the second of his 9 principles on policing states, and I'm paraphrasing here more or less, it says, to recognize always that the power of the police to fulfill their functions and duties is dependent on the public approval of their existence, actions, and behavior, and on the ability to secure and maintain public respect. My question to you is, how do the police go about building trust between officer and the community in which they serve?
Well, again, I truly believe, and I have experience in my time as a police officer, both a patrolman and as a detective, the vast majority of the people out there trust the police and have a good relationship with the police. That section of society is more commonly known as the silent majority. I think all the hoopla that's going on today about not the distrust for the police is a minority of the people that live in this country, and they, for some reason, they get the publicity, they get the press, they get the media behind them, and that's the narrative that's being pushed. But I really believe that the majority of the people that live in this country trust the police.
Like I say, the police are there to protect and serve. I know a lot of times they get a bad rap. A lot of officers sign up to protect and serve, and that's what I believe. I really do. You're listening to Light 'em Up, and we focus on leadership, the criminal justice system, and crime scene investigation. We enlighten, educate, and empower others with the truth, and like it or not, the truth disturbs, the truth divides, but ultimately, the truth delivers. We're talking with retired Cleveland Police Homicide Detective Tom Armelli, and you may remember Tom from his episodes on the First 48 on the A&E television network. Detective Armelli has investigated over 200 homicides in the city of Cleveland, and he's the author of 5 books relating to the history of the Cleveland Police Department and his work as a homicide detective. Tom, as we move forward, let's talk a little bit about how the police officer, and I know we've touched a lot on some of these questions, and you've shared a lot of information leading up to some of my further questions. The police officer is the most visible symbol of government authority that we have. What can a police officer say to someone who is anti-authority? Where does the officer start trying to talk to someone who just is completely turned off to the message that the police officer would share?
When you're confronted with somebody who's of that mindset, there's probably not much you can say to them that's going to change their mind. I think the only thing that will change their mind is your actions, and they have to be open-minded about it too. It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
A lot of these people say they don't trust the police, but they have nothing to base that on. So I think by the actions of individual officers and police departments as a whole, I think that's the only way that's the best way to get the individuals that hate the police to come around to the other side.
Yeah. A follow-up question I had would be, when someone would say something derogatory like, pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. I mean, how do you rationally talk to an individual who would express thoughts like that? I think it's really difficult, like you said. The person just doesn't want to hear the message of law enforcement.
Yeah, again, that's correct. You can't talk to somebody that doesn't want to talk to you. And, if that person wants to open up a conversation, a reasonable conversation, then that's fine. It seems to me that someone who would be on the street marching and protesting and shouting those kind of things are not really open to a discussion, and you're not going to change their mind by talking to them. And again, it just has to be, there's always going to be people like that.
Yeah.
And again, your actions speak louder than words, both as an individual police officer and as a police department.
No, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about effective management within the law enforcement agency. It's usually primarily concerned with putting the right people in the right place with the right resources. It's with the goal ultimately of creating positive public safety outcomes. During your tenure, looking back, what tools or equipment or anything would have helped you to do your job better that for whatever reasons the city didn't provide that for you? Again,
it comes down to money.
Money, okay.
It would be great to have more people working in the lab so you get your test results back quicker. It would be great to have double the size of the homicide unit and most of the other units in the police department. Everybody's working short nowadays, and it's not just Cleveland, it's all over the place. Money's tight, budgets are tight for cities all over the country. They're cutting back on police services.
Yeah.
If there was more money available to hire more people and to increase lab capabilities and some really the equipment that we have is basic. Just it all comes down to money, Phil. It's budget. It's just like anything else. It's money.
I see, absolutely. What needs to be changed? Does there need to be increased staffing, or are there issues with the dispatching system to where you just don't want your officers to simply be chasing calls, call after call? What needs to be changed in the process?
Again, Phil, that's public education to when to call the police, when not to call the police would alleviate a little bit of the dispatcher's nightmare. But the thing is, that's what the police are here for. You mentioned before that we're the most visible portion of the government. We're out there in uniforms and marked cars 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right out in the neighborhoods. We're not sitting behind a desk at City Hall and people got to get in their car or get in a bus and come down to see us. You pick up the phone and we come out to see you. We're just the easiest people to get a hold of. You make a call because you got a raccoon in your attic, or you can't turn the water off in your house, the faucet's broken, and you're in a panic. Call the police. And we've been out for all those kind of things. So we just you can't say no. You got to go.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good slogan. You can't say no. You got to go. There's been some calls for defunding the police, and I'm not exactly sure what that actually means. If it's even a rational and viable option to address issues of excessive force. In what recently would be termed as a seismic shift in police culture in the recent pushback after the death of George Floyd, the NYPD Commissioner Dermot Shea, he reassigned about 600 officers that served in the anti-crime units targeting violent crime. Now, you worked in the 6th and the 3rd districts of Cleveland when you were a member of the street crime unit. What's the purpose? What purpose do the anti-crime units serve? And in your professional opinion, should they have been disbanded?
Those anti-crime units are crucial. They're so important. They're the ones who are out there, making a lot of good arrests. It's just beyond me, and it's all politically driven. That the action in New York, reassigning those 600 anti-crime crime guys, and that's all politically driven. Yeah, those units are just crucial to any big city police department. You got to have guys out there in plain clothes that are mingling in the crowds, that are doing the drug stings and prostitution stings and robbery details, and you just got to have them. Public's going to suffer in their absence.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about some statistics. Statistics show that white people are killed at a far higher number, but blacks are killed at a far higher rate disproportionately to their population percentage in the country. Why do you think more isn't made out of this fact?
Well, again, those are numbers that are put out by the FBI and any other university that's done any research. The numbers all come out the same, but it's again, that's a story the media doesn't want to tell. They seem happy to drive home the idea that the police are out there brutalizing people and shooting black people left and right, and nothing could be further from the truth. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, I think there have been studies to show that a police officer is more reluctant to use deadly force against a minority than a white person.
I see. That's interesting. Let's talk about qualified immunity. Not too many people are talking about that right now. That's not the buzz. Is qualified immunity, is it necessary to do the job, and can the job be done effectively if it's done away with?
Well, it's definitely necessary. You can't expect police officers to go out and do their job. We make mistakes. Police officers make a ton of mistakes all the time. I made 1 million mistakes in my 30 or 40 years on the job. And can I be willing to put my home and family in jeopardy because I made an honest mistake? Absolutely not. And the fact of the matter is, Phil, that qualified immunity exists only in the absence of when a police officer acts clearly outside the law, he has no qualified immunity.
I see.
Qualified immunity is there to protect police officers who make honest mistakes and maybe use poor judgment, but they're still acting with the best interests of the public.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting to hear. Tom, how much time is spent in the academy on knowing and learning things like the Fourth Amendment regarding search and seizure law, what probable cause is and how it's established, and say, for example, when the Miranda rights are required and when they're not?
So I really don't know what the answer to that question is. When I went to the academy was 10 weeks long. Now it's 6 months long.
I see.
I'm sure they spent a considerable amount of time on Miranda and the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, but I couldn't tell you how much time. But I'm sure it's one of the things that they really pound into these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about Miranda, do the Miranda rights interfere with police efforts? I have a book that I share with my students. It's a counterpoint. One side takes one position and then the other side takes another position. Do the Miranda rights interfere with police efforts, in your opinion?
I don't think so anymore. I mean, Miranda has been around for 50 years now. It's on TV. It's on every cop show. Everybody knows everybody knows what your Miranda rights are without having being told by a police officer. But the fact of the matter is, when we interview somebody, they already know what their Miranda rights are. It's just our duty to read them to them and ask them if they want to talk or not.
Yeah, I see. What's the difference if they're in custody or not in custody as to whether or not the Miranda rights are required or not?
Well, Miranda is required if someone is in custody. It doesn't apply when you're out on the street interviewing potential suspects or witnesses or anything like that. It's, once someone has been arrested or their liberty has been restricted and you're going to question them, then you have to read the Miranda warning.
I see. Let's talk a little bit about the landmark Supreme Court decision, Mapp versus Ohio, which actually took place right in Cleveland, I believe, in Cleveland, Ohio. I know you know about Mapp versus Ohio, but I doubt that our listeners know much about it. It was a landmark Supreme Court decision in which on June 19th of 61, the High Court ruled 6-3 that evidence obtained in violation of the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures, is inadmissible in state courts. Tom, how important is that decision for due process protections today?
It's an important decision that police officers use every day.
Mm-hmm.
We're guided by the Fourth Amendment when we're obtaining search warrants or searching somebody's car or searching somebody's house, searching somebody's person, and most police officers are very well versed in how that applies. It's just part of the game now. It's just something that we do, something that we're used to, and it's really not anything that's a hindrance to our investigation. And as a matter of fact, it's in place to protect the public, and I'm a member of the public too. And I don't want somebody coming down here and kicking my door because they think I'm doing something something wrong, whether they have probable cause or not. So it's a good thing. And the police work with it, and it works well.
Yeah. Have you witnessed any evidence of the Fourth Amendment, the rights that are contained in the Fourth Amendment, being eroded since that landmark decision? Have things swung in a different direction?
No, and I think the opposite is true. I think that since MAP in 61, that the courts have even restricted and required more evidence and more hoops for the police to jump through to get a search warrant or to search property or anything like that. So, and again, nothing, not really that much that interferes with an investigation. Is just, one of the steps that we have to follow. So I don't think any policeman have any problem with the Fourth Amendment at all. That's what we're here for. We're behind the Fourth Amendment. That's part of the Constitution. That's part of our job is to support and defend. So we're all for it.
No, absolutely. Let's swing a little bit towards the recent events with the George Floyd case. How is it that an officer such as Derek Chauvin, the lead defendant in the George Floyd homicide, who has 18 previous use of force complaints filed against him, is permitted to fly under the radar and keep his job?
Well, my thought is that none of us have any information other than if that's a fact that he has 18 use of force complaints. You have to put that in context. Most of the active best policemen are going to have the most complaints against them because they're out there, they're active, they're proactive, they're interacting with members of the community, they're asking questions, they're out there doing investigations, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that's going to create a lot of arrests, a lot of good arrests, a lot of commendations, and it's also going to create a lot of complaints. So you have to kind of put it in context. I don't know, what kind of a police officer he was and how what those 18 use of force complaints were, where they came from, how they were adjudicated. So, I mean, it really means nothing to me unless I have some more context to compare it with.
No, absolutely. I understand. Kneeling on a cuffed suspect's neck. Where does that procedure come from? I mean, can all four officers be ignorant of positional asphyxiation? Where does that come from, in your opinion?
Positional asphyxiation, I'm sure, is, at least in Cleveland, and I'm sure probably across the country, in the last 5 or 10 years, that's been a real hot topic. Everybody has received, I know everybody in Cleveland has received training. Probably everybody in Ohio has received training on positional asphyxiation. This technique, I don't think, and I'm only getting what I get off the internet. I don't have any personal friends in Minneapolis, and so I really don't know. I have no firsthand information. But from what I understand, that kneeling on the neck is a technique that's taught in their police academy on how to subdue and hold a suspect.
I see.
It's not kneeling on the throat. It's kneeling on the side of the neck, the back of the neck. But it's a technique that's taught in their police academy. And again, I don't know what the coroner ruled was Floyd's cause of death. If he suffocated or I don't know what that was. So if that's a technique that's taught in the police academy and Floyd died of a heart attack, then I don't know how they're going to prove that he was killed by a police officer.
Cases against police officers are not easy cases to prosecute. Just historically, they haven't been easy.
Well, and because the fact of the matter is that 99 times out of 100, the policemen are out there doing the right thing. I mean, it looked terrible what you see on these videos that are on the internet and been shown on TV. But no one knows what the police side of it was. Nobody knows the history. Nobody knows what was going on in the officer's mind at the time. That's the important thing. These things have to be, judges and juries and prosecutors have to look at what that police officer knew at the time and what was going through his mind and why he did what he did. And you can't say because I saw it on TV. It's got to come from inside. You got to judge that policeman from his point of view and not from 20/20 hindsight.
Sure. Armchair quarterbacking. Chokeholds. Are they a necessary form of police tactics?
That's another slippery slope of a chokehold. I guess it would be. It's depending upon how it's used. If you've ever been in a back alley in the middle of the night by yourself, or wrestling with somebody who you caught doing something, and you're in a fight for your life. And if I got to choke somebody, they'll get choked, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's kind of hard to be in a fight with somebody when they have no rules and you have a ton of rules that you're trying to fight somebody and fight them by the rules, and you're going to lose every time. So
yeah. Do the recent moves to ban chokeholds? Do these kind of things handcuff officers with what they can and cannot do in order to enforce the law? Have we gone too far in taking tools away from the police?
Yeah, I think we have. I think the chokehold is something that's trained technique. If you're practiced in that technique, I don't see any. It looks bad, it sounds bad, but in essence, it's used properly. It's no more dangerous than punching somebody in the face or any other kind of form of self-defense.
I hear you. To talk more about tactics, generally you might have maybe 1, maybe 2 seconds in order to handcuff a suspect. People don't always comply and turn around when an officer says, "I'm placing you under arrest." Do you think in any way that maybe poor technique or poor handcuffing procedure led to a situation that would have been or could have been avoided if Rashard Brooks, who was shot in the Wendy's parking lot in Atlanta, was cuffed properly and in a timely manner? What are your thoughts on the handcuffing procedure?
I'm really not too up on that case. From what I understand, the guy fell asleep at a Wendy's drive-thru. The police were called, and they talked to him for an extended period of time before they decided to put him under arrest. And once they announced that he was being arrested, that's when all hell broke loose.
Yeah.
And sometimes trying to be Mr. Officer friendly and using the minimum amount of force necessary only leads to additional injury and additional harm. Would they have been better if they just went up there and yanked the guy up from behind the steering wheel, threw him on the ground, and handcuffed him, and he got scuffed up and bruised, and he went to jail, or we had the outcome that actually played out?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Let me ask you about 2 terms that hopefully you've heard before, and you give a simple definition of what they are. Beating feet is the first one, and hats and bats. If something goes to hats and bats, what does that, if anything, refer to in your mind?
I'm not familiar with either one of those terms.
Okay.
Yeah. Beating feet, that means like someone's running away from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You say a suspect's beating feet, or I would assume that means kind of refers to a suspect, a foot pursuit or something like that. Hats and bats, I'm not familiar with at all.
Okay. I was just curious. Let's talk about no-knock warrants. Let's shift gears here a little bit and get back to procedure and process. Speak to the need for a no-knock warrant versus the traditional process of getting a warrant signed by a judge. And to follow up on that, have you ever served a no-knock warrant?
I've been involved in no-knock warrant searches, and normally those are narcotics-type warrants. The narcotics unit will, if they're hitting a drug house, you don't want to stand at the door and knock and yell police while these guys are flushing everything down the toilet. So once they explain the circumstances and why they need to be able to enter a home unannounced, and they make that case to a judge, and the judge will sign agreeing that a no-knock warrant is called for, then those warrants are executed. And it's a case where you kind of sneak up on the house, you bust down the door, the SWAT team or the narcotics guys go charging in, and they're trying to catch people off guard and preserve evidence and those kind of things.
You're listening to Light 'em Up, and we focus on leadership, the criminal justice system, and crime scene investigation. We're honored to be sitting down with retired Cleveland Police Homicide Detective Tom Armelli. Tom is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and he's hammered out a stellar and highly decorated career in law enforcement, joining the Cleveland Police Department in 1981 and recently retiring in 2016. You may remember him from his episodes on the First 48 on the A&E television network. Detective Armelli has investigated over 200 homicides and is the author of 5 books relating to the history of the Cleveland Police Department and his work as a homicide detective. Tom, is there any validity in the broken windows theory of criminal justice, in your professional opinion?
Well, yeah, I'm a strong believer in that theory. I think it worked well where it was originally put into place in New York City, and I think it's a good model for most police departments in most communities.
Yeah, I agree. How do we effectively go about getting guns off of the street?
That's a $1 million question. The most effective way, I think, are to use the tools that we already have. We have a lot of laws governing the use and carry of firearms, and I think disbanding these anti-crime units and street crime units is hurting the police's ability to keep illegal firearms off the street. And I think that's the key, is to keep the illegal firearms off the street, enforce the laws that we have. When police arrest individuals that violate the firearms laws, they need to be dealt with and not slapped on the wrist.
Yeah, I agree. In 2017, there were 171 officers killed in the line of duty. In 2018, 158, and in 2019, 89. Have you ever been shot at in the line of duty? And if you want to share with us or not, have you ever been shot?
I've never been shot at, and I've never been shot.
Oh, great. Excellent.
And that's probably 90% of the police officers working, they're probably in the same boat as I am. It's not an everyday occurrence.
Yeah. Well, thank God for that. Did you work with officers who have lost their lives in performing their duty during your tenure?
I never had a partner shot or killed in the line of duty. In my time on the police department, we probably lost 5 or 10 officers that were shot and killed in the line of duty, and I knew 1 or 2 of them casualty.
Let's talk about being on the job, and as it's described, being on the job. Policing is never done. It's always an unfinished business, and it's been said that no other profession will give you as much or sometimes take as much from you. The job can reward you like no other, but one day it might demand from you everything in return. What did it mean for you to take the job and to be on the job during your career?
Well, that's an accurate, I think, description. Is that no other profession can give you as much, but no other profession can take as much. I mean, you see the best of people and you see the worst of people. Unfortunately, you see the worst of people a lot more than you see the best. You see some terrible things, and it's you just have to learn not to take those things home with you. Sometimes it's tough, but you got to do that. You got to work through it and separate yourself from it. The other thing, your other statement about policing is never done. That's another thing that's tough for police officers. If you're a carpenter or a plumber, or you get to a job, you can build things, and there's an end point when the job is done. The house is built, and you're finished, and you move on to the next job. Well, police work's not like that. There is no end. Day after day, you go to work, and it's complaint after complaint, crime after crime, and there's no end to it. There's no success story. There's no big success story. There's a lot of little success stories, but crime's going to be here as long as there's more than 2 human beings on Earth. That's just the way it's going to be.
Oh, absolutely. To what do you attribute staying grounded and focused and productive during your 35 plus 40 years on the job?
Well, personally, you have to have a good mindset. You have to be able to separate yourself from the things that happen on the street and in the job. You have to work well with your coworkers. You have to share experiences with them. You have to have friends. You have to have family. You can't make this job your life, or at least I couldn't, and I didn't want to.
Yeah.
A lot of guys do, and a lot of guys can live with it. Everybody's got to find their own way of dealing with it, and most police officers do.
Yeah. Being a detective, you see everything. How do you find the ability to detach the innocence from violence that can occur within some homes, especially when young children are the victims? Innocent young children. How do you detach from that type of violence mentally to do the job?
Well, it's hard. At times, it's very hard. I learned very early on in my career from policemen that I respected that, you get to a homicide scene where the children may be the victims, or children are the victims of any crime. It's not your job. It's not your place to feel sorry for them, to pity them, to get emotionally involved. Your job is to find out what happened and investigate this crime. And, if you get emotionally involved, it's just a distraction and prevent you from doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I see. You have to stay focused. You have to keep the blinders on. Absolutely. Giving notification to next of kin of a deceased family member. Where do you summons the strength to do that? 200 cases. Where does that strength come from? Does the process ever become easier to do? I mean, of course, it's a terrible process. After doing it, does delivering the words, do they come easier for you?
It's never easy. I had like a little technique that I use that maybe helped me deal with it as well as the people that I was informing. You try and be sympathetic. You try and be comforting. You try and make sure that whoever you're telling is not alone. You get a neighbor, you get a friend to come over there with you, so that you can't stay there forever. Once you tell them the news, they have somebody to be there with them. But it's just, in a lot of times, I would say the majority of times when you show up at the door and you knock and you say who you are and where you work, they got a real good idea what's coming next. Yeah. And any hesitation just increases the pain. So you just kind of gotta sit them down and lay it out for them and tell them what happened and why you're there, and offer a shoulder to cry on for a little bit, and then you got to move on.
Yeah. You have to be able to compartmentalize, I imagine.
The other thing too is when you're in homicide, these people that you're informing are people that you're going to have to deal with for the next couple of weeks or months or years as the investigation and arrest and prosecution goes forward. So this is the first time you're meeting these people, and you're going to have conversations with them in the future on many different occasions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So securing their cooperation is important. So it's important to build rapport as best you can in difficult circumstances. Like they always say, I wish we could have met under different circumstances. So
right.
Yeah, I follow what you mean and what you said. Every time a cop has to attend another police officer's funeral, and for family members as well. I mean, you pray that it would be the last time that you'd ever have to do that. But, you know, your life experience and your wisdom tells you that it won't be. And I know it's not an easy topic to talk about, but let's talk about the stresses on the job that police officers face, which sometimes can cause them to eat their guns. We're talking about suicide among enforcement officers, law enforcement officers. In 2019, 10 active NYPD officers killed themselves, which was double the average annual number. Is there a mental health crisis in law enforcement? Can you speak to that, Tom?
I think there's probably a mental health crisis in law enforcement, and it's not only related to the suicide factor. I think, you know, in the last couple of years, the stresses and demands and that have been put on police officers as a group and individually are just overwhelming for some people. You know, we're being beat up in the media left and right. You're being disrespected in the streets, and it's a hard thing to come to every day, and it's a hard thing to deal with. Everybody takes this job because they want to help people,
right?
And you know, you end up down the street and you feel like you're the enemy, and it's tough for some people to handle, and some guys just can't handle it.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, is there a crucial need for peer support? And internally, how does the force need to go about reducing the stigma of asking for and receiving mental health counseling without the fear of being exiled to a desk job or having to turn in their gun and shield? Speak to that process.
Well, we were pretty lucky in the Cleveland Police Department for years and years. I think even before I was in the academy, they had the police had a full-time psychologist on staff available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, who, although she had an office in the police building, there was no records kept in there. The police department had no access to anything that was discussed in her office. And so I think they were way ahead of the game there. This person was well-liked and respected and was open to visits and talks. And I think that was a big help a big thing for us that we've had that for so long available to us. And we also have an employee assistance unit, which is several detectives that are in that unit who've been through things on their own and now have become counselors and are available to help police officers that are in trouble. You can go there, on your own to talk about stuff, or if you know your partner's having a hard time, you can call them and say, hey, would you please reach out to this guy? Don't tell him I called you, but he needs to talk to somebody. And so there are ways that we've dealt with that in Cleveland, and kudos to the Cleveland Police Department for leading the way on that.
Yeah, no, that's a definite plus. Much needed too. Much needed, especially with all the stresses that are involved in being on the job. Hey, Tom, tell us about your experience being a founding member of the Police Historical Society and Museum, and where exactly in Cleveland is that building located?
When I was a kid, I was the worst student in history, probably. So I'm still amazed at myself that I'm so interested in the history of the police department and the history of the city of Cleveland. Back in 1983, one of our detectives was in London and visited the Scotland Yard Black Watch Police Museum.
I see.
And came back to Cleveland and said we ought to do that here. Cleveland Police Department has a big history in law enforcement. They were, back at the turn of the last century, they were on the cutting edge of science in law enforcement, and it was one of the best police departments in the country, if not the world. So there's a lot of history in Cleveland, a lot of police history.
Sure.
And so we put together a police museum. We've been in business for about 35 years now. The museum's located in the Justice Center,
okay.
Police headquarters building. Been closed for a couple of months now, and it'll probably be closed for a couple of months more due to the COVID-19 situation. But we have people down there working, putting together new displays, doing research, and when we open back up, we'll have a big celebration.
Interesting. It looks like a fantastic place to spend an afternoon, when all this COVID stuff disappears, God willing. That's definitely going to be a stop for me and for my students, and it just looks like an interesting place. It really does.
Feel free to come down, give us a call, give me a call. We'll give the students a personal tour and talk to them.
They would love that. They would absolutely love that. As we get ready to head around third base, heading home, let's talk about some more lighthearted questions. Tell me this, Tom. Who's a better detective and why? Andy Sipowicz, who was played by Dennis Franz in the ABC television series NYPD Blue of the past, or Donnie Wahlberg as Danny Reagan on Blue Bloods? I love Sipowicz.
I like Dennis Franz.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to watch police-related TV shows because, and I'm sure it is for most policemen. The minute you see something that's totally whack, but I like the NYPD Blue, and I like Mike Sipowicz, and my mom was a big fan of the Blue Blood, so I'll have to talk to her about that.
And you mentioned something about my next question. What has been or what is your favorite police television show?
I like the old school stuff. I'm a big fan of, and I think it might be the first police show that was ever out there. It might even be before Dragnet. I like the Car 54, and I like Barney Miller.
Okay, yeah.
And because I think most of those shows were about policemen and not necessarily crime.
I see, yeah. I love Barney Miller. That was a great show. What are your thoughts about the canceling of shows like Cops and Live PD due to the recent issues that the nation has faced? What are your thoughts about canceling shows like that? Cops had been on the air for probably 30 years.
I heard that happen. I don't know what drove that decision, so I don't know. But I thought, those shows, that gives the public a front row seat to what they're paying for. The tax money pays, police salaries, and they ought to be able to see, what goes into that, what these police officers are out there doing, how they do their job. And so I don't know the reason for the cancellations, but I think the public is going to miss that.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Live PD. I thought that was a well put together show. Yeah. That's going to be something that I miss watching on TV. Hey Tom, is there a cold case that more than all the others that might stick out from your detective squad that wasn't able to be solved for any reason whatsoever? And if yes, regarding that cold case, what case, if you can mention anything about it, and why so? And you don't have to get into details or anything like that, but was there one case that kind of stuck in your craw that you just couldn't crack it because of time or resources or evidence or what?
I think we had this one sticks out in my mind because it was pretty highly publicized, but although we had a few cases that we didn't solve, and they're all important, and I wish we could have solved them all, but this one here kind of sticks in my mind. The victim's name was Stephen Halton.
Okay.
And he was employed at the Cleveland Clinic. He was some kind of a technician in the operating room or donor transplant office, and about 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, he's waiting for a bus to go to work on Lakeshore Boulevard, and a neighbor hears gunshots, maybe a single gunshot, and looks out and sees Stephen laying dead on the sidewalk.
Wow.
The thing is, here's a good kid, earning a good paycheck. He did all the right things. He's going to work, trying to make a living for his wife and his family, and for some reason, at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, someone decides to take his life, right there on the street. So by the time we got there was absolutely almost no evidence to be had. It was so very few leads. It was tough to follow up on. Yeah, that was a hard one. And you know what? We still it's a cold case, but it's not a closed case.
I see.
We never close any of our cases. When I was up there, for the 10 years I was up there, any case that wasn't solved sat on my desk. I never filed it away, and every once in a while we look at them and just hope that something would ring a bell. And so we never closed them. They just weren't worked on for a while.
I see. That's interesting. Very interesting. The person's name again?
Stephen Halton.
Halton. Okay. Very interesting.
Halton.
Okay. Wow. That's interesting. Tom, it's been great to sit down and talk with you. Excellent information that you've been able to share with our listeners. We always want to leave our listeners with the opportunity for our guest to have the last word. Let me tell them first, though, for those who are just joining us at the end, you really have missed a tremendous interview with retired Cleveland Police Homicide Detective Tom Armelli. Tom's a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and he's hammered out a stellar and highly decorated career in law enforcement. He joined the Cleveland Police Department in 1981 and recently retired in 2016. And you might remember Tom from his episodes on the First 48 on the A&E television network. Detective Armelli has investigated over 200 homicides, and he's the author of 5 books relating to the history of the Cleveland Police Department and his work as a homicide detective. Tom, I'm very grateful to you indeed. Like I said, I want to give you the last word before we close out here. We've been going at it now, and we've been going at it for over an hour, and it's just been really, really interesting. Wrap things up for our listeners, and I want you to know how grateful I am to you for your time and for your expertise.
It was great talking to you, Phil. I mean, I love talking about police stuff. You know, it was a job that I loved. I'm still a policeman, actually. I work for the Cleveland Clinic now doing investigations as part of their police department. So one of these days I'll quit, but I've been doing it for 42 or 43 years now. I don't consider it a job. It's something that there's nothing else in the world that I would have rather have done, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it, and I enjoyed it, and I worked with some great people and met some great people and some great citizens, and it was just I couldn't ask for anything more. It was great.
Yeah, I read in your bio that it's the best job you've ever taken, and that's great. That really is. When you love what you do, it's as if you never have to go to work a single day in your life.
Absolutely correct.